Hey folks, this is Kelani. It's finally here. The time machine back to 2004, or 2006 I guess, depending on how you want to look at it, is up and running, so you can relive the glory days of vanilla World of Warcraft. A few things are a little different, but for the most part Blizzard have done an excellent job at recreating the game as it was back then. They had to make some tough decisions about what to keep, what to change, which patch to work with, how to actually get a progression path laid out without using the exact same patches as we had in vanilla, and it's been a tough job for sure, but it looks like they've pulled it off. World of Warcraft has been the #1 viewed game on Twitch ever since the release of Classic, and with so many streamers hopping on to play WoW just to play Classic realms, I don't think it's going to give up that top spot for a little while. It actually peaked at over 1.2 million viewers from what I saw personally, which is absolutely insane. I don't think any event for the retail version of WoW could have pulled in this many viewers, so it's pretty safe to say that at this point in time, the Classic launch was a huge success. Or I guess it was for those of us who could get in. Having the character creation process open and available for a week before the game launched was a really cool idea, and it let us create our characters at our own pace and reserve the names we were wanting to play with. The only issue is that it also allowed anyone with enough time to sit on the servers for hours before the game actually launched to get in before everyone else. Now, I'm not going to complain too much, that's what my wife and I did, and we were able to play right from the get-go. But if you set everything up hoping to get in right before 3 PM Pacific time, or thereabouts, you know, you had the snacks laid out, everything was cleared from your timetable, day off work, you know, everything laid out perfectly so you could log in at 3 PM and start playing, you were probably greeted by an oh so familiar friend. A friend you probably didn't want to see again, but hey, it's vanilla, and it wouldn't be a true vanilla experience without a queue so long that it made you question how badly you want to play with Dave. Because if Dave is in the game right now leveling up his mage and you're sat facing a screen that says 25,000 people are ahead of you in the queue, Dave might suddenly become the worst person you could possibly think of playing with, and I wouldn't blame you. Some friends decided to swap over to Fairlina after an hour or so of playing. Not a particularly good idea, if I do say so myself. They waited in that queue for 7 hours before finally getting in, and here's the hilarious part, they only got in at that point in time because the entirety of Kalimdor was disconnected from the game. Yeah, that probably booted a few thousand people easily, which freed up some queue space to allow a few other players in for a little bit of playtime. But to be fair, Blizzard has been very vocal about this for the last week or so. Herod, Whitemane, Fairlina, Shazra, and any other server marked as full are actually full. If you're hoping to play on one of those servers, you have to get in quick, and you have to get in early. If you don't, you'll be sat in a queue of over 20,000 people, which means you might not even get to play at all on the day you try to log in. I guarantee you that no one, and I mean no one, will willingly give up their spot in game right now. They'll try everything: auto running against the wall, remote logging in from work, getting one of those little waterbird tippy toy things to press their movement key every few seconds while they sleep. When you're faced with these kinds of queues, you don't take any chances. Speaking of which, let me just quickly tab over to Classic and make sure I'm not AFK. Alright, cool. Where was I? Oh yeah, people staying logged in. That's why the queues aren't going down at all, and why Blizzard said if you can, grab your friends, grab your guildies, and move to a different server. If you absolutely want to play on launch day, or I guess launch week at this point, pick one of the low pop servers and just pray you have enough players later on. Now, even though they have given us some fair warnings, they also didn't really give us that many servers to begin with. Obviously, it wasn't enough to handle the influx of players at launch, but they've been adding a few at a time now that we can see just how long the queues are. But people don't want to start over. No one wants to be on the server with no other players, and if your friends got in and you're the odd one out, I doubt you'll want to play on your own on another server either. Unfortunately, I don't really see a good way to handle this right now, but with hindsight being 2020, I would say we should have had more servers to choose from during the initial name reservation period. Blizzard does have a good point. If they open too many servers right now and spread everyone too thinly, we might just not like it later on because we'll only have a few thousand people per server instead of an actual healthy server population, just less servers to actually play on. Of course, they could then address that later on with things like server merges, but that wouldn't really be in the spirit of Classic, I don't think. Now, as the hype of launch cools down, I assume servers will start to stabilize and things will get better as time goes on. But for now, you just gotta get in early, that's kind of it. If you've been hopping around realms and still getting into huge queues, even on realms that are marked as medium, give everything another look over. Apparently, they just changed how the full, high, medium, and low population markers are calculated. Previously, they were compared against the fullest realms, which right now really doesn't make sense because there are some crazy outliers like Herod, Whitemane, and Fairlina. So instead of that, it's now going to compare the current online player base to the server's max capacity. That should mean any server with a queue will be marked as high or full instead of medium. Hopefully that will clear a few things up for anyone wanting to log into any server, as long as it means they get to play through a little bit of Classic. If it's not high or full, it shouldn't really have a queue. I think we'll also get server transfers at some point in the future. I do believe that was mentioned, so rolling on a lower population server doesn't mean you'll be stuck there forever. We have no idea how far in the future transfers could pop up though, so you might have to ride it out for a few weeks or maybe even months. Now, assuming you could actually get into your chosen server, things weren't all too bad. Of course, there are far too many people cramped into every starting zone, but you're only going to get this once. This right here, this doesn't happen again until a new area unlocks or a new expansion is released. It's wonderful, isn't it? Even the 5 to 10 second delay couldn't detract from the scene of hundreds of players descending on unknowing NPCs in a glorious stampede. Now, as delightful as this picture is, it did make for a few problems. With so many players, it was quite difficult to tag mobs, as you may imagine, and the huge input delay made that even worse. But that was actually part of the fun. Grouping up to get more tags was super important, and being quick on the draw to actually get the tag is incredibly satisfying, even if you are tagging mobs away from other people. The whole tagging thing is going to be a mixed bag for sure, and even in our first day of play, we've already had a few encounters for the story bug. Tagging creates a lot of competition for mobs, raw materials, and lootable treasures. It's always interesting to see what happens when someone is going to die because they pulled too much. If you help them out, you don't get anything for it, and they'll take all the loot and credit. If you let them die, those mobs will reset, and you have a chance to get the credit and loot. It's going to depend on the moment and how you're feeling, I guess, and whether or not they stole some of those mobs from you in the first place, but we had a cool little interaction with a chap who was near death. We swooped in, a quick gouge, a heal, and a bit of DPS later, and his mobs were dead. Without missing a beat, he opened trade and passed over a silver with a quick thank you. Which was a surprise to say the least, but then again, dying kind of sucks in Classic because there's only a handful of graveyards dotted around where you'll spawn as a spirit. You're guaranteed to have a long run almost no matter where you die, so if someone helps you out, be sure to say at least thank you. And then we had the flip side of that where we made it to a chest before someone else and started to loot it. Now, I don't know how you guys do it in your house, but if you're in a group with random chaps, you roll for the chest and the highest roll gets to open. But if you're not in a group, that's first come first serve. If you aren't fast enough to click on that chest, you get what's left over. There are some exceptions for people who are killing mobs close to a chest with the intention of looting it, but this wasn't one of those scenarios. When we got to the chest first, the chaps trailing behind called us some rather unfriendly names, but that's alright, I got the silver bar. I think the rules of vanilla create a really interesting dynamic between players, where you're competing for a lot of things, but you don't necessarily have to be. You can group up to make things easier, but even then you'll be competing with other groups. But at least then you've got a group of people working together so you can all get the tags on the mobs before everyone else. I've enjoyed our first few steps in Classic and will continue to play as long as it entertains me. I really wish we had some kind of numbers to look at for this though. In a recent interview, Ian said that back in the day, a server could hold about 3,000 players. Not too bad, but compared to the 25,000 plus queue we're seeing on some servers, I think we're running around with significantly more people these days. Now, a big part of that is the layering tech that they're using for Classic, which generates new instances of a server when they get too full. It's kind of like sharding, but it's a lot more static. You can't move out of your layer very easily, and there's no phasing tech in vanilla, so you shouldn't be popping in and out of anyone's field of view, which is awesome, by the way. Seeing people run from spot to spot, doing quest to quest, and specifically seeing people who you were questing alongside level up at about the same rate as you is really cool, because these realms are static and there's no cross-realm play. You can run into the same people over and over again on your adventures because you're all tied down to the same place, the same server. With cross-realm play, anyone can be from anywhere, so the chances of seeing the same person at level 20 and then again at level 40 is more or less impossible with cross-realm play. But that's not the case for vanilla or classic. In fact, those kinds of interactions are how you form bonds in classic. We were grouping up with some chaps for Goldshire quests, specifically for Goldtooth, I remember, and then we saw some of the same characters in Westfall when we were doing Defius quests. I really do think the rule set of classic allows for a more integrated community, which goes past just leveling and exploring. It's also about professions and reputation. I've been barking in trade quite a lot today, selling wands and bags more than anything else, and while I've been making a pretty penny off it, I've also been recognized quite a bit. Now, maybe it's because I have a YouTube channel and a handful of subscribers, but a few people were bringing their friends over to my barking spot to get the free enchants, to pick up a cheapish wand, and to get them set up with bags. That's pretty awesome in my book, and when we get into the later game where some of the recipes are quite rare, chances are you're going to know specific players who have specific recipes or patterns that you want to make use of. I really can't wait for that. But anyway, numbers. I seriously hope we get some numbers about Classic WoW, even if it's just really obscure info, like how many characters were created, the longest queue and queue time, how quickly some of the new servers filled up, the kind of fun numbers that they did for things like Azerite and Artifact Power, just so we have an idea of how popular this launch actually was. Now, obviously, I would love to see some direct comparisons between Classic and BFA, numbers, players, how many people are playing, monthly users, all that jazz when this has actually been out for a while, but I know that's never going to happen. Blizzard won't actively set the two games against each other, and I think that's probably for the best. Both BFA and Classic have their place, and it's great that you get access to both with a single subscription. I still think it's kind of silly that you can't be logged into both Classic and BFA at the same time. I'm sure they have their reasons, and it might be tied to account sharing, but I think it's a huge missed opportunity with the state of the queue specifically. No one wants to just stare at a queue. That's boring. That's like watching paint dry. But if you give the people who are unable to get into their preferred Classic realm the option of hopping on BFA while they wait, they might actually find a few things they enjoy about the current state of the game. At any rate, it's going to be more BFA playtime, so I don't really see a downside. But right now you're essentially saying you have to wait for Classic and we're not letting you play BFA in the meantime. That's pretty lame for me. I just don't want to log into BFA whatsoever because it will kick me from Classic, and I'm not sitting in that queue again, no way, no sir. So I guess I just won't play BFA for a little bit. I'm sure a lot of others who intend to keep playing both versions feel the same way. We're being forced to choose, and sorry BFA, but Classic is the new cool kid on the block right now. If I'm being honest with you, I kind of don't want to play BFA right now. I'm having way more fun than I thought I would with Classic, and I already knew I was going to enjoy it because I had a blast on the beta. I was kind of forced onto BFA last night sometime because the entirety of Eastern Kingdoms was disconnected, including all of the Alliance streamers for Fairlina, which is kind of every Alliance streamer because that's the streamer realm, and none of us could get back in. It was back to a 17,000 queue or whatever, which was not depleting at all. The queues were just too long, so pretty much everyone decided to hop on BFA or go to sleep or whatever. We decided we'd try to get some last minute dailies done. and we just didn't want to do them, so we logged off and did something else. If we couldn't play Classic, we just didn't want to play WoW at that point. That's kind of dangerous, because I do want to keep playing BFA, but right now I think Classic is just a lot more fun. But that's how launch has gone for us so far. How are you finding Classic World of Warcraft? Have you been able to get into your preferred server, or did you decide to move on to a lower population realm to actually get past the queues? How are you finding the Classic experience when compared to Battle for Azeroth? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see the names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.